Welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the show where I speak with the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Ruwan Kodikara. Now, Ruwan is Senior Manager of Corporate Communications at Amazon. He has been instrumental when it comes to carrying out strategic comms and long-term comms planning work, as well as strengthening Amazon's work around corporate social responsibility and diversity and inclusion, which he's incredibly passionate about. Ruwan was formerly Special Advisor and Head of Media at Number 10 to the then Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg, the former Lib Dem leader. In this role, Ruwan was Clegg's representative on all government announcements managed by the Number 10 comms grid and worked with special advisors to David Cameron. He comes from a wealth of background within public affairs and has worked within consultancy for the likes of Quilla Consultants and also MHP. After 4 very successful years at Amazon, he's now headed on to the next chapter of his career journey and will be joining Sony Music as Global Comms Director. Welcome to the show, Ruwan.
Hi, Leila. Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me on. You make me sound really good there. kind of feel like I should employ you as my media spokesperson.
No problem at all. I would love to do that. And, you know, it's fantastic to have you on the show because I think, you know, we were chatting before this about the instrumental work that PR and comms does do. And often this is, you know, behind the scenes, so to speak. But I think, you know, it's going to be really fascinating, kind of not only learning about your personal background and how you came to be where you are today, but also some of the intrinsics that go beyond behind the scenes and you know, how important obviously diversity, inclusion and belonging is, which I know is a real passion of yours. But first and foremost, for those of our listeners who perhaps don't know you as well as I do, give us a little synopsis into your background and how Ruwan came to be where he is today, from sector to sector, in with Number 10. I mean, it's just been, I'm sure it's been insightful.
Yeah, it's been a journey. I think it's kind of strange. So where it all started basically was when I was about 17, actually. So, you know, I was okay at school, but quite distracted at school at the same time. And I thought, do you know what, I'm going to take a year off and travel because, you know, that's what you think is needed when you're 17 years old. And I knew I had an interest in politics. I did it for A-level, but didn't really know what to do. So my dad said, well, look, why don't you volunteer on your year off working for the local MP? Just write to him. So I did, and then absolutely loved it. And then he said, there's actually a paid internship for the Lib Dems in their press office in Westminster. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, I better buy a suit and, you know, well up for this. So, you know, I did that experience for a year where I worked in Parliament, you know, worked for the leader's office, which was Charles Kennedy at the time, writing and faxing press releases, faxing press releases to the journalists, you know, and just being totally immersed in politics and absolutely loving it and learning from some incredible people at the time. And then it was the 2001 general election that happened. So they said, oh, you know, rather than going traveling, do you want to stay on and do that? And I'd say, like, it's the most amazing experience to work on an election campaign wherever you are in the world, because it's sort of comms at its purest form. You know, you're fighting to win a cause, and you're working 20-hour days, 7 days, 7 days a week, and it's an incredible experience. And so I just got completely hooked and was completely addicted to the idea of working in politics and working in comms. And, you know, I saw people like Alistair Campbell and, you know, the Blair government, thinking, wow, I'd love to work in Downing Street one day. So that was kind of my dream. Although it was a tough dream to have as a Lib Dem, because there's like so few members of Parliament. So the idea of being a government was kind of a far-fetched dream. You know, I had more chance of, you know, appearing in the West Wing than I did in Number 10. So then I went to university and then thought to myself, well, any holidays I have available, I've got to just work for free and just volunteer and do stuff. So I worked in comms agencies. I worked back in Parliament for the press office. And then Nick Clegg actually was a member of the European Parliament in Nottingham. So I used to take 2 buses to go down there and work for him. And so after that, then I joined Bell Pottinger, which is no more now, but it was very big agency, global agency run by Lord Bell, which was an incredible experience. I got to try lots of different things, and then kind of moved from agency to agency while still keeping my toe in politics. I worked on leadership campaigns for Nick Clegg for one, general election campaigns. I would just take time off and work on those. And then it's just pure luck. I mean, it just so happened that, there was a hung parliament, the Lib Dems got into power. The people that were in power were people that I'd grown up with in politics. And they said, can you come in and help with Nick's com? So I did that, and that was an incredible experience working in the bunker that is Downing Street. I mean, it's quite cool. It was like fulfilling that dream that I had from like the age 17. But I also used to kind of walk in there every day listening to Rage Against the Machine. That was my kind of like little thing to sort of say, I'm still cool. I'm not part of the establishment quite yet, So that was my rebellion. But it was amazing. And then we had the election, and that went very badly, but still a great experience. But then my dream was over, right? Because I was like, well, what do I do? Like, I've done politics now for a long time. I did what I wanted to do. What do I do next? And so I had to kind of find a new dream. And I was like, okay, well, I've always believed in doing stuff that makes you really uncomfortable and learning new things and just throwing yourself in and just thinking, you'll come out the other end learning more stuff. So I thought, okay, well, what's different? So corporate is different to politics, and big is different to small, and tech is driving the agenda right now. So I thought, well, Amazon looks like a cool place to be. And sort of 8 hours worth of interviews later, because they're pretty intense in terms of their recruitment process, for some reason they thought, yeah, we'll take him on. So worked there for 4 years, and it's been an amazing experience. I mean, I never knew what to expect, but and you're always kind of funny about American firms, right? Because when I was like 16, I worked at TGI Fridays, and they had all these weird isms that were very American. And I was like, this is ridiculous. But actually, Amazon has the same sort of American eccentricities, but they are fundamental to the business model. Once you're there, you realize just how important they are to why this company has grown from in the garage of Jeff Bezos to almost 800,000 employees worldwide. It's quite incredible. And you start building, you start adopting that culture, because actually it's a really good way to work. And the work that we've done over the last 4 years has been a great experience, great people to work with, doing some really cool stuff. And then after 4 years, I thought, well, okay, I've done that now. So what's the next thing? And I was like, okay, I've got to do something completely different. I've done UK stuff. I want to do international stuff. I've done tech, but I've always loved music, so let's try music. And so that's why I've landed at Sony Music, and I start very soon.
How incredibly exciting, and what a brilliant story, I must say as well, because obviously you studied European politics at Nottingham, I believe it was. And whilst you modestly say a lot of this was luck, I'm a strong believer in the fact that actually the harder you work, the luckier you get. And clearly all the volunteering work and the getting involved as much as you possibly can paid off, because you've now been in the in the lofty heights of kind of your 10 Downing Street, albeit listening to Rage Against the Machine, who, by the way, I love Rage Against the Machine. I love Rage Against the Machine and Papa Roach, actually, from my early days. But it's great to hear, because you're kind of now fulfilling the next dream, which and I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but you did share it with me before, so I will share it now. It's your music studio that you have built at home, so it kind of ties quite nicely into the next passion and the next chapter of your journey.
That was the hardest comms campaign I've ever had to do, was to convince my wife to allow us to have a music studio, but I did manage to succeed. It was good. But yeah, it's fulfilling. It's definitely fulfilling like a 15-year-old dream of like getting signed to a record label. So now I tell everyone I've just been signed to a record label. They're like, oh my God. So, yeah. But I'm actually just doing comms.
I love it. And talk to me about, because obviously, you come across as very kind of happy-go-lucky, but also very switched on. Obviously, clearly been very successful at what you do. Talk to us a little bit about your personal background, because I know that you are the youngest of three. Was it was it that made you so driven to do what you do? I know that your parents have been very supportive, and if I may read out a little quote here that I actually found rummaging around on the internet from your mum, who came in for Amazon Parents' Day, which I just think is so cool. How cool is that as an initiative?
That was good fun.
It says here, Ruwan's mum, Ashoka, added, "It's been a brilliant day and it's a very clever initiative from Amazon. It's really exciting to come along and visit such an innovative company. As a proud parent, it's been fantastic to learn more about Ruwan's career and understand more about what he's up to when at work. And it's great to see all those decades of parenting put into action!" Exclamation mark.
Put it to action. You gotta love parents, though. I mean, the thing is, like, they're first generation immigrants, right? So they came over in the 60s, and being Asian parents, I guess anyone who's listening who's got Asian parents probably have a similar thing when they were growing up, which is you're either a doctor or you're a lawyer or you're a dentist or you're some sort of very specific vocation. And, it's partly a cultural thing, but it's also partly the fact that, and now as a parent, I kind of see this, which is you're absolutely bricking it about, how, are your kids going to succeed? Are they going to do all right? And for a parent, the easiest way to see a route to success is things like vocational careers. So my oldest sister, who's I think 8 years older than me, she is a doctor. She's a consultant. So she fulfilled the dream of my Asian parents. And then my sister, being the middle sister, she is very successful. She actually runs a podcast herself called Mothers of Invention, and she lives in New York. She travels the world. She does a lot of incredible stuff around sustainability, climate change, etc. And then the sort of run to the litter is me. But I suppose I benefited in the sense that I didn't get as much pressure on me like my sisters did, because you're the youngest, and so they kind of give you a little bit more slack. But there was that kind of thing of he's interested in politics, so therefore he must become a lawyer. And well, what are you going to do with your life? What direction are you going to take? So I think sort of decades of parenting is more the kind of like, okay, we've seen the path you've taken, and it's been okay, and it's worked out all right. So we can now rest easily, thank God. So yeah, but I still don't think they quite understand what it is I do. I mean, when I started working at Bell Pottinger, which was my first grad job, my mum kept telling people I worked for Bollinger. And I tried to explain that this is a communications company. This is not alcohol, Mum. But I think she's finally started to understand what I do.
Oh, that is so funny. And I mean, I used to, I don't know if you used to watch there was a comedy show called Goodness Gracious Me.
Oh yeah.
And I've got a number of friends who are Asian and talk to them about kind of, the classic stereotypical Asian parents wanting them to be doctors and lawyers and what have you. But it's it's fascinating. But clearly, they must be terribly proud. I mean, what did they think when you landed at number 10?
Yeah, I think they liked it. I think my dad sent out a mass email to every single Sri Lankan person that he knows, and their friends and their friends' tennis partners. So they were very happy. I think a nice moment was my son was only my eldest. He was only about, I think, 8 months or 9 months old. And one of the cool things when you work at number 10 is they have someone who's in charge of the history of the house. And you get to have a meeting with them, and they show you all these old pictures and documents about the history of the house, and you can then do family tours. So for my dad's birthday, I took my son, my wife, and my dad along for the tour. And I think at that moment he was like, "Yeah, this is pretty cool that my son gets to do this kind of stuff." So I think they really enjoyed that bit.
Oh, fantastic. And I wonder as well, because I know that we've chatted offline about this, the diversity in inverted commas of our respective backgrounds. And, I wonder, when you reflect back on your time, at Amazon, number 10, and various other organizations, whether you think, I'm not saying necessarily your success is attributed to this, but it's a unique perspective from, as you say, being kind of second generation, your parents coming to the UK, maybe being more broad-minded to a certain degree and bringing diversity of thought and what have you. Do you think that has given you a unique perspective or helped you to a degree within your career?
Yeah, I think it's very hard to kind of pinpoint which one it is, but I think it is a mix of racial differences, gender differences, the fact of being the youngest of three, etc. I mean, like, for example, being the youngest of three, you do kind of learn to try and understand the different perspectives, because you'd have the heads on one side, the tails on the other, and you're the one in the middle trying to say, hey guys, can't we just be friends? And so I think sort of learning about, one of the fundamentals for comms is trying to understand the other side of the argument, and being able to put yourself in other people's shoes, because fundamentally you're trying to communicate and influence people. So that is really important. But I also think there's been loads of moments that have helped feed that. And I think it's even more important nowadays, because you have, with the digital age, and you've got fake news, and you've got lots of multiple news outlets, to reach people and influence people, whether that's through, traditional media and the BBC, all the way through to podcasting. There's different ways. And I think there were just key moments in my life which really helped get me into doing comms. So, I mean, there's one that has always stuck in my mind, which was like, I was, I think, 12 years old, and it was like our history lesson, and our teacher showed us all the evidence in history that shows that Guido Fawkes plotted to bomb Parliament. And so you write this thing saying, here's all the evidence, and he clearly did it. And then he goes, okay, well, let me show you loads of other sources of material. What do you think? And then you're like, oh God, actually, like, his signature looks forged, and this doesn't look right. And actually there's other sources saying this, so maybe he didn't do it. And it's one of those like light bulb moments that you live with forever, which is, that there are always different sides to a story, and there are different sources, and you have to think about who is motivated behind pushing certain messages. And therefore you have to always try and challenge yourself, and always question what you're being given, and look at the source and the motivation behind those sources. And it's weird, because that has stuck with, and that's a kind of technique that I've kept from 12 years old up to now, even in my profession.
That's an excellent story, though. And I think it's very illustrative for those that aren't akin to PR and comms, or don't necessarily work within this environment. But like you say, it is absolutely about stacking up the evidence, the arguments, the motives, everything like that. And, I bet that's absolutely fascinating. Sure, no one tries to start an argument with you over the dinner table because you have something to say. And, I'm sure you can't necessarily share all the stories from your career, but I mean, have there obviously the one when you were 12, but have there been any real moments where you thought, oh my goodness, I've literally come out of the other side, and I've managed to marry up the two parties, they're friends, it's sorted, it's great, where you've been particularly proud in your career, or thought, because I know you alluded to this when we've spoken before, have there been any particularly surreal moments where you thought, oh my good God, I can't believe this is happening, but actually utilize those communication skills to actually push something through?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few stories in number 10, but I can't really talk about them, because I don't know if I should. I'll give another one though. There was one of those definite kind of like wow moments career wise. One of those definite wow moments career wise for me was when I was in consultancy. So we were working to campaign for the release of a Russian political prisoner. His name was Mikhail Khodorkovsky. He was the richest man in Russia, fell foul of Putin because he financed the opposition parties, then got thrown into jail in Siberia. And when we spoke to the lawyers originally, who were exiled essentially in London, we said, well, what's the brief? And they said, is it to get him free? And they said, no, your job is to keep him alive. And I was like, okay, well, that's a strange brief for a comms person. And they said, well, what we mean is that you have to keep him in the public eye, and you have to keep politicians in the West talking about him enough that he's too important for them to kill. So I was like, okay, that's an interesting brief I've never had before. And that was an amazing campaign. So I used to have to go to Russia on a tourist visa, working on his second trial and briefing like the Western press when I was out there on a tourist visa. So, and the guy who did my job before, they actually stripped him of his visa and escorted him out of the country with the first trial. So I was obviously quite nervous, and I don't exactly blend in a Moscow city courtroom. I'm quite unique in a Moscow city courtroom. But it was incredible. I mean, there was this one time when I think David Cameron was visiting Russia, and he said at the beginning that he's not going to talk about human rights, he's going to talk about business relations. And obviously we weren't having that. We were like, okay, this guy, this political prisoner, he has to be the litmus test of UK-Russian relations. How do we make that happen? And this is where the comms comes into it, right? So there were loads of different things I decided we need to do. So one of them was we got all the former foreign secretaries to sign a letter to the Prime Minister saying, you must raise this case, and then gave it to the Sunday Times, who then put it front page of the Sunday Times the day before he was going, then briefing all the political journalists to say, this is an important case, you need to ask the Prime Minister questions about this, and when they're doing their joint press conference, it's very important. Then we spoke to civil rights people in Russia and asked them to then write to the embassy and present their case about present their point of view about the case. And then all these different pieces of like, how do we reach the Prime Minister? So the other one was I wrote, I actually did the first draft of a comment piece from Kodikara about the future of UK-Russian relations, which then the lawyers then translate into Russian. They physically hand it to him in his jail. He then dictates back amends, which then get translated back into English. And then I had to try and redo his comment piece. And then we had that, launch. And it's all about timing, right? And then by the end of it, he did raise the case with Putin. And then I heard feedback from friends who were in government saying that he was asking, like, where is all this stuff about Kodikara coming from? Why do people keep banging on about it? So that's the kind of job we do, which is we try to keep, like, we're not the front men, but it's to try and sort of figure out ways in which we can reach people to influence them to deliver change. So that was a fun one, definitely. He's free now, by the way. He's living in London. He's fine. He's safe. He's happy.
I'm so pleased you told that story. I think for those that are listening in, whether it is that you work in PR comms or any other discipline with our execs, or that you're a young aspiring graduate, what a fantastic story to plug why and some of the insight into the comms background. So I know that you say, look, you're not the front men or women, but actually I think the role is absolutely fundamental to ensuring, and obviously CSR and D&I all comes into that, because it is about making sure in this world of what can be fake news, as you mentioned there before, that we've got good, strong people behind the scenes who are able to circumnavigate obstacles and ultimately deliver a story with the right ethics and ethos and morals behind it, which I'm sure can be significantly questionable when we see a lot of what's happening over in over the pond and many places.
Yeah.
But agree, disagree, it is the narrative that goes across into the inboxes, into the newspapers of everyone on a day in, day out basis, and so it's such a highly influential role.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think it is, and I think it's increasingly more so. So I think when I started off this career, a lot of CEOs and leadership, their focus was fundamentally the bottom line, the shareholders, and that was it. And I think there has been an increasing understanding of how reputation impacts a business. And I think it's partly because of the way the media has changed and the way that people consume information, but I also think it's generational. I think that the next generation that are coming through are much more socially aware, much more active. And if you want to recruit those people, then you have to show that you share their values, and luckily for me, I get to benefit from the fact that they create the noise, so if they're saying we need to do more on gender parity, we need to do more to support BAME colleagues, we need to do more on sustainability, they get listened to a lot more, because they're the future of a lot of these businesses. It's great to see.
I absolutely, I concur, and I have a huge amount of faith in our future generations and future leaders. It's so important that we have role models and real models like yourself for others to be able to look up to. Not only to be able to relate in many different ways, whether it be from visible diversities like our ethnicities, or whether it be invisible diversities like mental health, but the future generations are, as you say, far more socially aware, tech savvy, and very happy to express their opinions ultimately. But as you alluded to, these generations of millennials and zillennials and what have you, will not stand for working for organizations who do not have a brand that is meaningful and where words are meaningless. foremost. Them, it is often about the wider impact that organisations can create, and it's very exciting to see that. I think what with everything in the press at the moment, and obviously worlds being turned upside down given the virus, and this kind of unprecedented time, all generations are all over kind of digital and social media, and it's a new way of communicating, and so you see those organisations far more transparently than perhaps you would do a decade ago, when you could, put out press statements or releases or whatever, and people would take that as gospel. Now, you could put something out and literally, check Twitter, and I try not to go on Twitter too much, to be fair, because I find it, it's, the Instagram's a nice, lovey, kind of happy one. Twitter, it's like, people are kind of are absolutely mercenary a lot of the time, but no, it's absolutely fascinating, the changes, and I'm sure it's been fascinating for you to watch how and where that has come from, and the future of PR and kind of socials across the board.
Yeah, and I think it has been. I think there are risks as well for comms, and as well as opportunities. So, I'm not I genuinely, I'm not really an expert on the stuff in terms of the rise of fake news and things like that. But what I have seen is that the way in which people consume news is really has changed a lot in some way, and hasn't changed at all in others. So the next generation, a lot more, they consume news in some ways accidentally. So they get it through things like Instagram, through things like Facebook. And if you're a bit older, you're like, well, how do you get news from Instagram? How do you get news from Facebook? But it's a lot of stuff is shared between people, and the risk of that is that things get shared in an echo chamber, and you assume that everyone has the same opinion as you. And so if you hear something or learn something different to that point of view, it makes you feel incredibly uncomfortable. Now, this is something that has always happened, in the sense that, if you're an avid reader of the Daily Mail, you're an avid reader of the Daily Mail, and if you're an avid reader of the Guardian, you're an avid reader of the Guardian. However, like there's never been that situation where you were entirely within an echo chamber of news, and that the difficulty of that we're starting to see a lot in politics, and and seeing that emerge. And I think that one of the things that obviously doesn't help is when companies are allowing this fake news to go unchallenged. And it was great to see what Twitter had done in terms of fact checking. But then at the same time, something that hasn't changed is one of the major sources of information for people is still the BBC. And if you go on Twitter, you assume the BBC is a far right organization, and if you go on Twitter, it's a far left communist organization. And my view is that if you are seen as both far right and far left, you're probably doing something right in terms of the kind of news that you're providing to people. But I still think it comes back to what I learned when I was 12 years old, which is something that I think, rather than just PR people, everyone needs to do more of now, which is check the sources of information, check the motivation behind it, but also really try hard to find out someone else's point of view. It's what makes you a better comms person, but I think nowadays it's what makes you safer in terms of the news that you're consuming. One of the tricks that I've always done from throughout my career was I would always try and make sure that I would think, if I was advising that person, what would I do? How would I tell them to kind of approach it? And I would try and take my head out of what I'm doing and figure that out. So, when I worked for Lib Dems, I would also think, okay, Gordon Brown's getting a lot of heat in the press, or Tony Blair is. And then I would think to myself, okay, if I was sitting there advising him and Gordon Brown said, what do you think I should do? Genuinely, what would I think he needs to do? And I think what that helps you do is it helps you ensure that you don't always stick into your echo chamber. Equally, like a right-wing conservative politician, what would I advise them to do? And so I have to think like a right-wing politician, think like a left-wing politician, and it just helps challenge yourself, and it helps you try and keep as broad a perspective as possible. But yeah, I think that kind of thing that most comms people tend to do. But now I think it's the sort of thing that everyone needs to do.
Absolutely. I love how you've related it to all, because it is ultimately, it's that diversity of thought and that open-mindedness of really trying to look through the lens of someone else, as opposed to just seeing it as a kind of pure tunnel vision of what needs to be done. Because as we all know, without that diversity of thought and that diversity of opinion and really trying to look at things holistically, you end up with kind of as you call it, the echo chamber or group think ultimately, which is not beneficial for anyone. And certainly in such a fast-paced moving world that we live in right now, innovation is key, and diversity of thought is a big attributor to that. So before we wrap up for today, because I could talk to you all day and, already want to ask more stories, because I just find this so insightful. But if you've listened to the show before, you'll know what is coming next. And that is the lightning round.
Lightning round, gosh.
The lightning, the lightning round, I'm going to give you 30 seconds or maybe a minute, because it's you, to answer each of the next questions before we round up and summarize
Will you tell me if I passed at the end of it, or
I might rank you. I will see how you do. First and foremost, what does diversity and inclusion and belonging mean to you personally?
I think for me, it's a mixture of things. So one is equality of opportunity. That's a very loaded statement to make, right? Equality of opportunity. So there was a really good, I'm really sorry. There was this really good viral video about the $100 race. I don't know if you saw that in the US. Did you see the $100 race?
Yes, I did actually post it out on social media, and it was...
Whoever's listening, Google the $100 race and check it out. It's basically these college kids are standing in line. It's like, right, you're going to win $100, but if you've had a private education, take 2 steps forward. If you've got both parents living with you, take 2 steps forward, and so on and so on. And I think it's just a stark example of what actually is equality of opportunity. Like, equality of opportunity means actually leveling the playing field by taking direct action to make that playing field level. And I think sometimes people don't understand that. And so that for me is absolutely crucial, is the equality of opportunity. The other thing is like an understanding and awareness of the barriers people face, and taking responsibility, for all of us taking responsibility to help overcome them throughout their journey. So, the whole movement that's happening right now is fantastic. And I think it has challenged people to try and understand better and, be more aware. Even my father-in-law, he started reading loads of books about it, which is quite very impressive for him to be doing that. But I think the key is, I think the big key from what we want to see from companies and individuals is not only showing an understanding, but what are you individually going to do to take responsibility to help people overcome that? And then the third one is what we talked about previously, which is just don't live in an echo chamber or vacuum, is a key one for me in terms of diversity and inclusion. Because inclusion is a key part of that, right? And diversity is a key part of that. If you live in an echo chamber or a vacuum, are you being diverse? Do you have diversity of thought? Probably not. If you live in an echo chamber and they're in a vacuum, are you being inclusive? Probably not. And for me, it's about challenging yourself to learn more. So that was my very long-winded lightning answer to what does it mean to me.
It was a great answer, though, and actually I'm really pleased you brought up that example, because I posted that on social media. I think it is one that does give you what is a pretty stark representation. I think people, because we as humans, we're emotional beings, you see that, you watch it, you can see the expression on people's faces, and it is touching. So when I reposted that, and obviously credited it to the person who had created it, because I think it's quite an old video, but very, very powerful still, is, and this is where you think about the negative stuff that we talked about before, is there's quite a few outlandish racist comments on it. Yeah. I couldn't believe it, absolutely, and I shouldn't say I couldn't believe it, I should believe it, but it was, it was just absolutely shocked. I mean, the vast majority very, very positive, but you just think, it's amazing that some just don't get it. Some just don't get it. We're so far away. But anyhow, I'm really pleased you brought that up, and I would echo that. Is absolutely check out that video, because it is one that is fantastic. So next question then: who has been your biggest inspiration throughout your career and/or your life? Could be personal.
Yeah. Okay. So. It's a genuinely a hard one to answer. I know I'm not giving you lightning answers. I'm sorry. This is like an absolute don't in PR, right? If this was someone I was advising, it'd be like, say it in a bullet, and I'm saying it pretty long-winded, so apologies. That's why PR people don't do podcasts. So for me, it's loads of people in different ways inspire me every day. And for me, it's hard to sort of pinpoint people. It's more moments for me. So, the moment of that history teacher teaching me about Guy Fawkes and check your sources, to one rainy day watching 12 Angry Men with my dad as a kid and thinking, oh my God, okay, one person was just said not guilty, 11 said they were guilty, and then in the end they all say he's not guilty. And that was a massive eye-opener in terms of like, things aren't always as they seem. You've got to challenge yourself. So, my best friend of 34 years who taught me the power of listening to, my parents and being a Buddhist and teaching me about being optimistic and having a really core group around you and having the right people around you that make you a better person, through to, my sister who, my middle sister, Tim, who is one of those, your older sister you always look up to because they take you to the pub when you're underage. And, one of the great things about my sister was I learned a lot from her in terms of her fascination of other people's lives and how that enriches your own life. And I think that's a key thing as well in comms, is just being interested in other people and what they do. And so, learning that from her has been big. So it's from all works of life, every day, and it's key moments for me.
Great answer. And finally, I wonder if you could go back in time and speak to the young Ruwan back in the day, say around about the time that you're 12, imagine, when you're talking to your history teacher. If you could give yourself, your younger self, any advice, what would you say? Or it could be someone who's listening in who wants to follow a similar career path. We have lots of students who also listen in and want to be inspired and considering what they're doing next.
I think one of the things I would definitely tell my 12-year-old self is be nicer to your parents, because it's the toughest job in the world. And now I can attest to that. It's not easy. There's no rule book. There's no playbook. So just give them some slack, I think, would be the main thing that I would say. No, I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest. I really think I've just been really lucky. I don't know if there's anything I would really change. I mean, I had really good friends around me. I kind of knew what I wanted to do quite early on. I met my wife when I was 19 years old, and we've been together like 20 years now. I think the main thing I would say is to learn from others, learn to be curious, learn from others, figure out a goal, work backwards from it, but be flexible, right? Because there's nothing worse than trying to have a goal and not be flexible about how you get there. I think the other one is what we've kind of talked about consistently today, which is like always challenge yourself to think from someone else's perspective. And it's really hard to do that because as human beings, we can't but help to think about ourselves, right? But to really try and force yourself to do that. And then learn the difference between facts and opinion, the motivation behind what you read and see, the difference between decisions based on knowns and unknowns. And that would be the main thing. I suppose if people were listening and they were thinking, they're listening and they're thinking, I'm also insane, I would like to work in comms and do the similar sort of thing that Ruwan's been doing. I would say it's about just learning and being curious and being fascinated by what's happening in the world. Just keep reading about what's happening in politics, in business, in culture, find out what your passions are, learn more about it, but then also just go out of your way to get involved in it, whether that's volunteering, volunteer for a charity and do comms for that charity where, you'll learn how it works, but you're also doing some good. Or go and, help out in a music festival and learn how to do stuff there, or go and, volunteer campaigning for an MP a candidate that you like, or whatever. Just get involved and you'll just pick up a lot and you'll meet people. And then, that's how you learn more. And that's what benefits your career in the long term is doing stuff and meeting people. Ultimately, it's as simple as that.
The power of the network is absolutely critical and not to be underestimated. Ruwan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been really fun. It's been awesome having you on the show. Absolutely awesome. And by way of my usual summary, there's been loads of learning points, but I think you actually summarised them there very, very well. I think the key pieces that stood out to me are absolutely ensuring that you don't remain in that echo chamber, looking at all the different perspectives, making sure that you learn and are curious. I think more curious and interested, as you have said, in other people, experiences, cultures, places, the more that you actually become a far more well-rounded individual yourself, because life is a journey. We're on a lifelong journey of learning, and every single one of us is continually experiencing new things and different perspectives. And so I think some fantastic learning pieces there. In particular, I love that story from when you were 12. I think that it's a really, you're kind of picturing it in your mind, is look at each different side of the argument, and it frames it just perfectly, because ultimately there is always going to be more than one opinion. There's multiple opinions. You must form your own. So in order to make that measured decision, check out people and their motives and what goes behind that, which ultimately is very much about people. I think, as you've clearly very well demonstrated, Ruwan, you're absolutely kind of a people person, and being able to get under the skin of what is behind the front of the window or under the skin of those individuals is absolutely key, and not just relevant to PR, but relevant to humans in general. The more that we can seek to learn about others, the more we can enable and foster better relationships and ultimately a more fulfilling life. So thank you again ever so much for being here, and best of luck as well at Sony.
Thank you. Yeah, very excited.
Very interested to see how your signing to your record label goes, which will be fab. And obviously I'll be seeing lots more of you because of our white paper. So very excited about that as well. I'm sure I'll be heeding your advice in addition. Thank you very much, Ruwan, for being here. My name is Leila Mackenzie-Delty. You've been listening to the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast show. We're with you every week, but we're here twice a week now at the moment. During these unprecedented times, we've been listening to the fantastic Ruwan Kodikara. You can check him out on LinkedIn, and we also will be putting all of the key learning pieces into the show notes for the end of today's show. So don't worry if you missed any of those nuggets of wisdom, they all will be there for you in abundance. Check out www.dahlglobal.org/podcast, and we will look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.